Hey there everybody, how's it going? My name's Carpo, and I'd like to talk for a few moments about psychedelics. Now I'm a little reluctant to make videos like this anymore, and I'll explain why. To tell you the truth, I usually would have notes before I started a video, and my intention wasn't really to talk about this, but I just thought it was something I had to discuss. And in the past I've made a lot of videos talking about psilocybin, DMT, LSD, and in years past, during the first YouTube adpocalypse, as they called it, a lot of people were being demonetized because of talking about certain substances, drugs, kratom, whatever it might be. During this whole time, I really never gave a damn about demonetization because I still had never had ads on my channel. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons why I've never had an AdSense account or had ads on my channel. Because of the fact that I don't want to feel like I have to edit and self-censor what I talk about. But I still do. And we all do. All YouTubers self-censor to an extent. And so with that said, I really just wanted to explain why I don't talk about psychedelics anymore. It's not necessarily for the, the ad aspect of it, I should say it's more of the fear of somebody taking it the wrong way, or maybe just putting myself out there in the world. I have a YouTube channel, and here I am saying, yes, I've used psychedelics, illegal drugs. But it's such an obligation to talk about these things, because it's something that any avid psychonaut or psychedelic user who has experimented with these substances has come to, most likely come to the same conclusion, that these are tools that can be used to really open up the mind to new possibilities. Now, long ago, I let go of the idea that psychedelics are some, mystical communion with God, or that a DMT experience takes you to some alien realm. I hung that up a long time ago when I realized that psychedelics just open up a part of you that is a larger part of the universe, if you will. I'm not going to go into details because the way I see it is very difficult to put into words, but I see the world as layers, as kind of this fractal nature, this resonant, I'm not going to say frequency, I'm not going to say energy, anything you put on it, it becomes a label. But I'd just like to say, to get that out of the way, that I don't believe psychedelics show you another place, but rather show you a place within yourself and allow you to adjust and rearrange the furniture within that room of your mind that you may not otherwise be able to arrange when you're so busy with daily life. It seems that psychedelics like psilocybin and LSD mimic serotonin. In other words, they fit the same locks as keys, similar to the way serotonin does. And serotonin is our feel normal or feel good chemical, if you will. To put it in a very simple way, this is something that I've kind of tried to simplify in my own studies, since it's never simple. When you have a lot of serotonin, then your dopamine levels drop. Dopamine is your motivator. When your serotonin level, when you become hungry, when you don't have any food, let's say, in the past, our ancestors, serotonin levels would drop, dopamine levels would rise, and you would go out and you would seek food. Once you've eaten, you're satiated, you're back to your, higher serotonin. It's not that simple, but it's important to recognize this, that serotonin is this feel-good chemical, because when you interrupt that lock with a different chemical like LSD or psilocybin, which look very similar to serotonin, you can only ask yourself, how did this evolve, and why did these substances, why do they work the way that they work? LSD obviously was synthetic, but it was derived from the ergot fungus. These compounds are natural in their raw form. So we can ask ourselves, do we want to sit and dwell on the aspect of humans growing alongside these drugs and try to give it some spiritual presence and say that God gave us these mushrooms to communion with some, entities? I'm trying to set that on the side, put it up on the shelf and say, let's just talk about the real benefits of these things. I've been taking psychedelics since probably about 1990, when somebody told me about LSD. And we went down to Portland and bought 6 hits of what was called Smileys. They called them Smileys. This is the first trip I remember. And we took the bus back to my house. We ate the Smileys, took 3 each, and all night that night, I actually was going to bring out some notes, if I have them here. Huh, I do. Kind of forgot I was even going to grab this. I took these notes while I was tripping, and these 2 pages right here, you can't see really the pages very well, but it's just this pencil and pen. This one says, "Wow, a spectacular fry." Fry means tripping on LSD, for those who don't know. I give this fry a 10.5 on my Fry-O scale. And then it has a 3 here. It's like a perfect 3 in between like 2 lines. I don't know where. And it says the 3 that no one wrote. How the hell did this 3 get here? Then the other side is a poem I wrote. And this must have been like my 2nd trip, perhaps. Or 3rd. It says, "Chemical friendships. Bonded. Sticky with THC crystals. Crystals of the past, now into the future. A future of dropping. A bright future of happiness and fortune. Sincerely yours, Dose Out Dude Josh Orr." So anyhow, I ran across those the other day, and I kind of put them in my little book, and I was like 15 years old. I couldn't believe it. You know, the shit I was doing when I was that age. It took me decades to really acclimate to the things that I had experienced in that state. And you know what kind of rekindled my passion for this is last Saturday at the Dead Show. Okay, let's say about 2 years ago, I saw a good friend of mine. He came by and he said, "I have some really good LSD." And I said, he's like, "Here, want to take some?" I said, "No, I'm super responsible with this stuff. I can't just take it anytime I want. I might take acid once every 2 years, even if I have access to it." So he said, "Well, I have these candies," that he was putting them on. There were these little rainbow gummy candies. And I believe he put a couple drops. I don't recall. All I know is that I pulled out this thing that said 500 micrograms each. And I was like, well, I took them with me to the Dead Show. And I knew it was good stuff. It was family stuff. And that's important when you're taking LSD. It's not like mushrooms where you can say, well, I know what it looks like. I know what mushrooms taste like, LSD could be anything these days. The shit that they're putting on paper. And that's partially the reason why I don't talk about it as much anymore. Because I don't want some kid listening to my advice and saying, wow, he said LSD was great. I'm going to go out and try it at some festival or rave. And then they end up taking some N-boom or something. And if you don't know what that is, then you shouldn't be taking LSD. Because if you do get N-boom, you're going to be upset. So anyhow, I had these candies. And after we got through the line at the Dead Show on Saturday, we sat down in the field and we decided to take them. I was so reluctant. I didn't want to because I'm always scared to trip, even though I know I'm going to have a great time. And that's really one of the main aspects of this I wanted to talk about. Serious trippers are nervous, and with good reason. Even people who take it medicinally and know their dose and know the time they're going to take it, and they're in a safe place, which is very important, set and setting, where you're at and the people you're with. Absolutely crucial to a good experience. But beyond that, it's still scary because you're like, well, I'm going to have to go through this come up. And the come up is, when you're coming up to the peak. And basically the first hour can be, or two can, first hour generally nothing, 45 minutes. But after that, maybe another hour can be uncomfortable. It can feel awkward, especially with mushrooms. Your stomach can turn and you feel weird and you're like, oh God, why did I do that? And then all of a sudden you break through. You break on through to the other side, I guess, as you would say. And once you've gotten into that state, you're connected with people on a level that ordinarily we can't connect with. Now, I don't want to, disclude MDMA, which is, a phenomenal tool for this. For introspection, PTSD, seeing kind of some of it's what I would call a milder psychedelic, but it doesn't take me to the same places that I can get to on psychedelics. And I'm not saying it's just an introductory drug. For a lot of people, it might be enough to have a supervised medical setting where you can take MDMA with the doctor and talk about your problems. Because if it's not coupled with cognitive behavioral therapy or some sort of a discussion with somebody who's trying to help you, then all you're doing is taking drugs. And maybe that's one of the aspects I wanted to cover and why I don't talk about it. The rave culture, the psychedelic culture, which has changed from my Day of the Dead shows when I was younger. And that wasn't even the Dead shows. That was like the second kind of wave of Dead shows, 30 years later. But that was a huge scene. I mean, there were people selling everything you can imagine on those lots, and it blew my mind. I was introduced to so many things in my teen years. LSD. I didn't even try mushrooms till a couple of years after LSD because there was so much of it around. And if you're at all familiar with the LSD scene, you know why. It's because before the year 2000, there was a huge laboratory that was making a lot of this shit. And they eventually got busted in the year 2000. Actually, Vice did a whole documentary about it, which is pretty interesting. But they had like this underground LSD palace, and there were some fucked up people involved. But we won't go into that. There was a lot of acid around. And so it wasn't a little later, I was 18 or so, somebody brought home this stuff, said it's DMT. Hey, yeah, I got this from some friend, and we smoked it, and that just blew my mind. But didn't touch it again or know anything about it until years later. And then smoked some DMT with some friends at Soak. Wow, that was an experience. And I got a couple grams, and over the next couple of years I experimented with it on my own and went through some really interesting places and came out on the other side saying, this isn't helping me, it's not the same. Because a psychedelic experience for me is like a cleansing. Put it this way, I don't believe in detox programs. There's all these people out there selling you bullshit that say this is going to detox, a juice cleanse, or, hop in this sauna, or steam away your toxins. And anybody who understands biology on any basic level knows that doesn't work, and that's not how toxins work. Your body is manufacturing toxins constantly, and getting rid of them is usually through your urine, but you can get some out through sweat. But the point being is that psychedelic experience is kind of like a cleansing of toxins, in the real sense, spiritual toxins. You can almost feel yourself shaking off these trivial bullshit that you've carried around with you for so long. And for me, the second half of the trip is really where I shine, really where I learn my lessons. And for an inexperienced person, they might ask, what's the difference, the real difference between LSD and psilocybin mushrooms? Should I take mushrooms or LSD? And often I get the question of, well, where can I get these things? People have emailed me asking me if I can send them mushrooms. Of course not. I would never do that. It's federally illegal. It's a felony. So anytime I interact with these things, I'm super cautious. I would just like to say, if you're determined enough, you can find them. Almost every state in the U.S. has mushrooms, and most countries have psychedelic mushrooms if you know what to look for, and most of them are very distinct from poisonous mushrooms. They look nothing like death caps, or the ones that are really going to damage you, but you still have to be super careful in some places. All I'm saying is do your research, but if you go to any festival, or music fest or concert, you can pick up, a variety of different LSD tabs from people. You can test them. There are test kits for everything, and that's what I want to say, that hands down, talking about this, do not take anything that you have not tested yourself. Let me tell you this, once years ago, I bought some Molly from this guy, MDMA. It was phenomenal. Crystal, just beautiful. I tested it, it passed, I tried it. I decided, let's get some more while it's around. A week later, I bought another gram. It looked identical. I tested it, it was yellow, not purple. And yellow means that it's cathinones. And synthetic cathinones are what they're using as a replacement for MDMA. So you go out to a club, somebody says, hey, you want some Molly? And you end up taking cathinones. It makes you sweat more. It doesn't give you the same insight or the same understanding or warmth that MDMA does, from what I've been told. But personally, I've never taken it because I'm not a dumbass. And maybe that's why I'm talking about these now. I'm kind of reluctant, but I want people to experience psychedelics but not be a dumbass about it. And that's very difficult to attain without a guru or an advisor. And there are a lot of underground psychedelic groups now, for whether it be MDMA or psilocybin or LSD. But now they're doing, they've always had ayahuasca ceremonies in these particular churches. They have one right, an ayahuasca church right in Portland here. And there are people out there trying to help one another to overcome their problems. And for me, I have really not a lot to complain about in my life. I love my family, I love my friends, and I'm alive, I can eat, I'm fed. Of course I'm broke, I'm not sure what to do with my life, and the usual work bullshit. But beyond that, I mean, that's just something that we always have something going on, right? Well, learning to cope with these things, learning to cope with life. Sometimes I wonder, well, God, my problems are so small compared to some of the problems people have. And God, I wish that people could just see themselves for who they are. And it seems so simple. But the minute I start talking about psychedelics, I already know that there's going to be a couple people out there who are scoffing at me and thinking, look at that druggie. Look at that stupid hippie with his long hair and, just what a fucking loser. Because I know that because people have told me that, whenever I talk about certain things, some people get really butthurt about it and upset, even kratom, psychedelics, cannabis, whatever it might be. Some people are very resistant to anything that alters your mind. And it's not just people who haven't tried it yet. I know people who have taken mushrooms or LSD and said they had a horrible experience and therefore they were changed for life in a negative way from it. And that I can understand. If it wasn't the right context, it wasn't the right place, you weren't with the right people, or sometimes, and we have to be honest here, you don't have the right mind. Because yes, there are some people who have a predisposition to psychotic illnesses. Psychosis, schizophrenia, these can be induced by taking psychedelics. And here's the scary part. These conditions usually show up between the ages of 18 to 25. And those are the same ages where so many people try psychedelics. You're already growing. You're already moving past puberty into adolescence, and your mind and your body are changing. You can trigger a psychotic episode by seeing something that maybe you didn't want to see about yourself, about the world. And it can lead you to delusions. And that's one of the things to be careful of. I've seen people have delusions of grandeur. People who take psychedelics and start thinking that they're literally God, or that they're here for a great purpose, a grand design, a grand scheme, and that they are the center of this great unfolding in the world. People who believe that they are gods, literally. I've seen a few people, and it's interesting because just yesterday I was reading the lyrics to one of my favorite Grateful Dead songs. It was "Estimated Prophet," and in the song, he talks about a guy, California, prophet on a burning shore, wheels in the sky, the sea will part before me. He's talking about, and they were asked about this, and I think it was Bob Weir who said, yeah, this song's, I guess, about the typical wide-eyed hippie who's just totally loaded, who you might see at the end of a Grateful Dead line at a show. The kind of guy who says, everybody, come here, listen to what I have to say. And, the kind of guy who thinks that they know the meaning of life, that they know all the answers, that they can teach everybody these grand purposes and designs of life. And psychedelics can make a condition like this much worse. And so kind of went off on that aspect of it, but it's really important to realize that these aren't to be taken lightly. This video is, if anything, harm reduction and perhaps curiosity easing for those who have wondered. I'm not... I would like to consider myself a very cautious psychonaut, and perhaps somewhat an expert on these things. I mean, the minute Arrowhead was online, I was on it. I mean, I have studied psychedelics continuously over the years, and about 20 years ago, talking with my friends, I just said, one day these things are going to start, being accepted. And then, of course, they're accepted in Holland. You can go in Holland and buy them in the store or various shops, but I believe it's only truffles and there's limits to it. But the point is that Denver decriminalized psychedelics, mushrooms, last month, and that is something amazing. I mean, that's a step in the right direction, because nobody's ever killed anybody on mushrooms. People don't take their lives on mushrooms. People don't harm other people when they're tripping. People don't go out and rob banks when they're tripping, or beat their children, or their wives, or husbands. The thing is, psychedelics show us a side of ourselves that is the direct opposite of what we are shown from alcohol, the great legal drug. If you want to know what psychedelics are like, look at the opposite of alcohol. Alcohol shuts down your thinking. It shuts down your processing. Psychedelics connect parts of your brain that ordinarily don't connect. And it does this by shutting down the frontal cortex, shutting down the thinking part of the brain. But when people hear that, they think, oh, well, if it shuts down your processing part, then it must shut down your thinking. And it's not that simple. What it does is it shuts down the part of your brain that makes it easy to get up and go make a cup of coffee, or even to simply find a lighter in your pocket. It shuts down your external senses and opens up an internal landscape that is so vast and wide that trying to define it and understand it is beyond anyone. So if you're in a safe place, a quiet place, with soft music, after you've gone through the chaos of the peak and the come up, all of a sudden you enter into this state of blissful awareness. And while DMT can take people there, it's over so fast that it's not enjoyable. And I should say it's enjoyable, but it's not. You're not able to take a lot away from it. I'm not, personally. And a person may say, well, if you're not aware, ayahuasca, which has become this kind of catch-all popular psychedelic term, ayahuasca ceremonies, it's kind of the trendy thing in Peru. Go down there and drink some frickin' root bark out of a styrofoam cup with some half-ass fake priest. You don't have to do it in the jungle. You can order pharmawaska. You can order all the ingredients to make ayahuasca online. Okay? Just so you know. And anyhow, ayahuasca is DMT in an oral form, because DMT consumed orally is broken down before it can be absorbed by the bloodstream. But if you take it with an MAOI, which is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, and people who take certain pills know what that is, this stops the monoamine from oxidizing the drug, and it allows it to enter your bloodstream. So by drinking enough of the ayahuasca root, you can go through an intense 8, 10, 12-hour psychedelic journey. But the problem is, you're puking. You feel sick. And traditionally, this is considered purging, right? You're processing. Honestly, I don't know if I really go for that. I used to believe that kind of stuff. It's just like with peyote. Say you take the peyote, you're going to puke like crazy, but then you're going to feel awesome. I'd rather take a psychedelic where I don't need to puke my guts out, because I can have the same experience. I've taken mescaline citrate, so I know the difference between eating cactus and... In other words, people want to do things traditionally. You think you have to sit in the jungle and Ralph with some loincloth on. You don't. You don't. You just have to be with somebody who's willing to set you straight and say, look, it's an experience you can have, just like plastic beads, the idea of the plastic shaman. It's all intent. I left a comment. I was talking with somebody the other day. I think it was Dakota of Earth. He's another YouTuber, and he posts shit from around the world. And I said something like that because he said he was talking about material items and how it really doesn't matter. And I was saying, yeah, it's plastic beads are just as good for mala beads. In other words, it's not about some fancy jewel or a certain crystal or a rock from the earth that you have to hold in a certain position facing the north, on a Wednesday and a full moon or something to get some enlightenment. But nor are you just going to get enlightenment from taking psychedelics. In other words, you can do just as well with the plastic beads. The psychedelic experience, though, has to be done properly. Has to be done. You can't just take drugs and wander off in the woods and go on a journey. It takes time for your brain to rewire. And when people do, they can help their depression for months on end. And this has been documented over and over. So I guess I could go on about it, but I've rambled quite enough about psychedelics. My early days, I experimented a lot until one time I took too much. And somebody sold me this acid called Felix, and he said, take one, it's very strong, but it was like half the price I usually pay. And so I took all 6 of them. I started with 1, then I took 2, and that was stupid, took the other 3, and next thing you know, I am just out of my mind. I didn't take acid for several years after that, and even to this day, I really prefer mushrooms if I have a choice, but sometimes the longevity of an LSD experience can, I don't know, lend something else to the experience, especially if you have to move or be functional. So that's my ramble. I guess there are a few things that I could probably add to this, but I just wanted to cover whatever kind of came to mind talking about these things. It's not just those psychedelics, of course, but those are the ones who have helped me. So be cautious, be smart. If you are going to do these things, look at it as, just as you would taking anything else. Don't just trust it because somebody said, oh, it's good stuff, But just know that there are test kits in the modern day you can order online to test anything. And it is good to be with somebody who knows and who has had an experience, because they can help calm you down. Because time can stand still when you're in that zone. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Talk to y'all later. Have a good evening. Be safe. Be smart. Have a good trip.